You're listening to Inside Eyes, and I'm your host, Laura Northrup. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Inside Eyes. I'm your host, Laura Northrup, and this series is about the use of entheogens and psychedelics to heal from sexual trauma. In today's episode, I interview Gloria. Gloria is going to talk about her struggles with suicidality, a sexual assault she experienced in her 20s, and her experience using ketamine and mushrooms in her healing process. A few things to know before we get into the interview. First of all, Gloria loves astrology, and as a lifelong West Coaster, I have to admit I do too. So there will be some astrology references, but I think they will make sense in context even if you're not an astrology fan. Another thing to note, many people talk about plant medicines as spirits and refer to the medicines with pronouns. So you will hear Gloria talk about the plant medicine of mushrooms as a she in this episode. Also, a word of caution. None of the episodes in this series are suitable for children, and the topics are emotionally evocative. Please take care of yourself as the listener. Okay, here we go. Thank you so much for being here today and being willing to talk about psychedelics and sexual trauma and healing.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be a part of this project.
Well, so to start, I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about your life and about how you came to the point of deciding to try out psychedelics.
Sure. So I had two small, minor experiences with psychedelics where I had a trip on LSD that was a journey inside of my brain, and I decided the psychedelics were not for me because the inside of my brain was a very hard place. And then another time where I took a very low dose of a mushroom tea and spent a long time looking at myself in the mirror. The next day, painted a self-portrait for the first time in my whole life, which I still have not done again. But it felt, there was something that moved inside of me. But then I just set them down for a while. And then last year I was wildly suicidal, which was a norm for me, but it felt like there was a new breaking point, and a friend recommended that I check out ketamine, and it turns out that supported me really, really well, which led into exploring other psychedelics. And then I found mushrooms again, and she kind of brought me back in a way that I was like, oh, we were supposed to meet again. It just, the time wasn't then, and we reunited.
So the first sort of, it sounds like intentionally, not that those other experiences with the LSD and psilocybin weren't healing, but like the first kind of going into it with the intention of doing healing work was with ketamine. Mm-hmm. Can you say a little bit about your suicidality or kind of like what was going on for you at the time?
Sure. So I am a Virgo moon. I had very clear plans about what my death process was going to look like, spent a lot of time like kind of planning logistics, and was really trying to avoid leaving a large mess for my loved ones to clean up. And so in that process, there was less of an impulsivity around it, and thus more time to kind of grasp at straws for other options.
And so you were like being pretty honest with people in your life that you were suicidal.
Yeah, most people who have known me for a while know that that's a thing that I've experienced a lot. And there was a different level of kind of closure that I was seeking with people, of wanting to kind of have a farewell that they didn't necessarily know was going to be that way. So there were some people I was being very honest with, and others that knew things were very hard, but maybe didn't know how close to the end things felt.
So one of your friends knew you were doing some of this farewell, goodbye stuff, and that's who suggested ketamine.
Yeah, so she is someone who we had actually matched on Tinder and had never met because one of us was always traveling, and then I moved out of that town, and then we would just like chat about our lives. We chat about our dates, just kind of, we were really honest about the state of our brains and what worked for us and what didn't. And she's the one who recommended ketamine to me. And we actually only just met like a month ago.
Wow. You became pen pals.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Like, just, and we just were chatting this morning, actually. Like, we talk about our charts. We'll look at the other person's transits and be like, something looks like it's hard for you today. Are you doing okay? And yeah, so I'm like, being queer and psychedelics together really saved my whole life.
I'm super curious about that experience of becoming so intimate and being able to have somebody who you can share with like that. Were you being as open with people who you were knowing kind of on the daily about that, or was that more something that was easier to do in the pen paling?
It was definitely easier to do in the pen paling. Something that I always kind of struggle with is the like crying wolf thing, especially around suicide, where I'm not wanting to cause a like frantic concern if it doesn't actually feel like that's the place that I'm really in, and thus often err on the side of caution of not alerting people because I don't want them to freak out in a specific type of way. I also had a really great therapist during this process who was like, we had safety plans at a point where I was like, I actually can't come to, like, I just cannot make myself get to therapy. We would chat on the phone, or like at one point he was like, what do you need? What will be a way that you can like connect and like reach out? And for a while we were sending each other memes just as a way to be like, hey, I'm alive. So there was definitely some support in place. And so having that also made me feel less, I guess I felt like I didn't need to reach out and be as clear with my friends, because I knew that there was another person who, yes, had like an attachment to me in the way that like I was his client, and he obviously didn't want to see me die, and also had less of an emotional investment in my like whole life trajectory, I guess.
Well, and just side note, you're kind of speaking to something that I think makes it hard to talk about suicide, is that oftentimes it is really activating for people to hear about somebody they love feeling that way. So it can be hard to have conversations about it that are, how do I want to say this? Like exploring it, like making space for it, and taking it seriously, and if needed, taking, more serious action, like a safety plan or whatnot. But it can be hard to be able to talk about it and have people listen without, understandably, getting really upset. And culturally, I don't think we have a lot of experience or language knowing how to talk about someone feeling such an intense feeling that is also painful for us.
Absolutely. And that was, at that time, there were a couple of friends who were in very similar places with their own mental health. And so there's also that, there's kind of, I think this is probably still true, that most of the people that I love and are in my like very inner circle have all had experiences with suicidality at some point. So there's a common understanding about, of course, it feels different and looks different for everybody, but just knowing that similar place. And thus there's more of that caution around activation, for sure.
Yeah, you mean like perhaps that you don't, even though they might understand, that you don't want to share with them. And
totally. Yeah.
Well, so you decided to try the ketamine then.
Yeah.
And you went to a ketamine clinic. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what was that like for you?
It was strange in so many ways. I had considered ECT beforehand, and that doctor was like, I don't think this is going to work for you.
And can you clarify for people listening what ECT is?
Electroconvulsion therapy, which someone else had recommended, and my mom felt very wary of that, which now, in retrospect, I'm glad that that's not the route I ended up taking. And I went to the ketamine clinic and met with the doctor, and he listened to, the parts of my story and was like, this sounds like it would be a good fit for you. And I went the first time, and, I didn't feel a shift the next day, but that was to be expected. The protocol there was that you go 6 times in about 2 weeks, and then come back every 4 to 6 weeks or so as needed for about a year. And after that second time, the next day I woke up and I didn't want to die. And I was very, very hesitant about that. I was like, this can't be real. Like, this is what I've been actively thinking about for weeks. And then since then, that has remained true.
And you finished that treatment?
So I did the 6 sessions in those first 2 weeks. And then they were like, you'll know when you need to come back, which also terrified me. I was like, am I gonna just like go back to feeling that same way? That sounds awful. Like, I can't do that. I can't be this back and forth, so extreme. And when I noticed that I needed to come back, it was when just things just got like a little bit harder. In the ways that ways I noticed that things had shifted for me is just like basics of living, where I like could do my laundry. I could go to work without taking a car all of the time. I could not cry at work all the time. I could socialize with my friends outside of my home. And it didn't just mean that we were like sharing space watching television, which I also love doing with them still, but that wasn't the only option for socializing. Just small things of being able to clean my room, which felt huge. And also I was like, oh, I can just breathe a little bit more. And so when those things started to get like a little bit less easy is when I knew I should go back.
Mm-hmm. And how long ago was that initial 6-week?
Just over a year.
Just over a year ago. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. It helped you a lot. Do you want to say anything about what the experience was like while you were actually in the ketamine land? Yeah. So
it's a microdose. So it's an IV infusion that I would listen to the same album. So it was about an hour, which is kind of how long I knew how long the session was. And during that, I would think about and like envision pieces of my future that didn't seem plausible before, because
they told you to do that, or that's just what you were doing?
That's just what happened.
Okay, and did you get to pick the album?
Oh yeah, totally. I brought my own music. Yeah.
Do you want to say what you were listening to?
I listened to Freudian by Daniel Caesar, which is an album that it had just recently come out, and the same friend who recommended ketamine to me recommended that album to me. And I remember texting her at the end and being like, I'm listening to this album right now and you saved my life. You know, I was just like in it. And
so you would listen to the album, mm-hmm. and then something that you were just doing on your own as you were envisioning pieces of your future that didn't seem plausible at the time.
Yeah, things would just kind of appear in this, where I was like, oh, this is a thing I would really like. This is something that I could do, i.e. having a future in general. Yeah, so just like kind of having those visions. There was some processing of like hard friendships that had ended, that I was able to kind of have a conversation with that person and kind of let go of maybe some resentment I had been carrying.
And just to clarify, mm-hmm. you mean like have a conversation in your own world during the ketamine
trip? Just kind of like in my brain, have a conversation with them.
Yeah.
And then there were a lot of love feelings, you know, like I would feel really grateful for the people in my life, which, is a thing that I always do, but I just would try to like remember, like tell that person, you know, like this is a person you don't see that much, like remind them how much you love them and like how much you appreciate them in your life.
So when you say a microdose, you mean a dose that's small enough that you were still obviously having effects, mm-hmm. But it wasn't being used maybe in the way that people use it for like anesthesia.
Correct. Yeah. Part of what I experienced and what they told me what I'd probably experience was some like dissociative experiences. And I was like, that's fine, I dissociate all the time. But this was like a very different type of dissociation where like my body felt a little bit just like heavier in the chair. I was in like a kind of dentist-y type recliner chair. And yeah, so that kind of thing where I was definitely aware of the fact that I had a body and that my body was there, but there was more of a reminder when I would look at my fingers and be like, oh yeah, totally, you're there. Yeah, so that's kind of what was going on, but I was very aware of my surroundings and like folks coming in to check up on me, and like I didn't feel frightened or anything, and the dosage is based on weight, and then there's an option to like also have an anti-nausea med, and that was like the biggest side effect for me, is that I did throw up once afterward, but I also have like a pretty tender stomach, and then I would just like need to take some prune lax after, because then I was just like, I can't poop right after. But that's like the only side effect I experienced.
Yeah, it was just like digestive stuff.
Totally.
Wow. And so then after that, you felt, it sounds like after the second session, you felt like a lot of the suicidality stuff going away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I noticed just like the slight shifts of kind of being released from like the tight grip of depression.
Yeah, yeah. And then how did you end up deciding to go more towards psilocybin?
So then I was like, I wonder if other people are into this whole psychedelic science thing, you know? Like, I wonder if people, you know, and found the whole world of that field and just like that work. And then I remembered that another ex of mine had shown me a map study a couple years ago. Like, I was really excited about it, but it was in Colorado, and I was like, they've already accepted people, you know, like I'm not going to qualify for that study. But it's nice to know that this is a possibility at some point. And so I remembered that and just like delved into the world. I started listening to a lot of podcasts about it, and then really wanted to start talking to people about it in real life. And I found a researcher whose work I really enjoyed, and she was teaching a class in New York. And I like weaseled my way into that class. It was like already sold out. And I was like, can I just come? And, you know, if someone doesn't show up, can I get in? And they were like, why don't you just facilitate the volunteer activity we want people to do? And then heard her speaking about a mushroom retreat that was happening.
And do you want to say who this is that you're excited about?
So Catherine McLean, and she was facilitating an upcoming women's retreat at this place, Myco Meditations in Jamaica. And I had heard people talking about the retreat on some of these podcasts and was like, I'm absolutely not going to Jamaica to do mushrooms with a bunch of white men. That sounds horrendous. And
that's who goes on the retreats.
I had looked at some photos, and it's often a mixed group, gender-wise.
Yeah. And that retreat is held in Jamaica because it's legal to hold it there?
Yeah.
It's not because of it sort of originating in that place.
Yeah. Just because it's a legal use option for folks. And later found out that, like, the person who runs the retreats was friends with the family who, like, kind of hosts a lot of the activities. And so that's how, like, specifically those folks in Jamaica were connected to him. And so then the class that I took was called Becoming a Good Psychedelic Samaritan. So it was a lot about sitting for folks while they're tripping, or just, they're talking about sitting in like festival settings and in community spaces. So that just kind of quelled a lot of my anxiety around mushrooms. That was the other part, is that I was really excited about the work, but I was also really scared that I was like, psychedelics aren't for me. Like, my brain is so hard. But since my brain had shifted, then I was like, I think I could do this.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I want to ask you more about this, because I know that for a lot of people, psychedelics as a healing tool that's like a really broad term, mm-hmm. psychedelics or entheogens, and there's so many different kinds, mm-hmm. and they address you and interact with you and work with you in so many different ways. And it sounds like the ketamine experience was not maybe as frightening to go into, and it sounds like you were a bit more sort of trepidatious or scared of the psilocybin. Is that?
Yeah, for sure. For some reason, the ketamine just felt more cut and dry. I was like, I'll go in, I'll do this thing. Clinics are not a place that I trust, and also because it was a microdose, that was part of it.
Uh-huh. Sounds like where you were at, the ketamine helped stabilize you. Mm-hmm. Like, I guess I'm wondering, does that feel like you needed to get to that place first before doing the psilocybin?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I guess I'm partly asking because I think this is just really important information for people who might be listening, that there is something about being in a reasonable state of being able to actually experience and integrate what's happening to you. And I don't know if you want to say more.
Yeah, so definitely that's something with mushrooms. Different types of life-changing experiences happen for me, but there's a lot more. I mean, there's just so much integration that needs to happen, and it's much more of an active practice aside from the trip. The trip is an experience for me, and then the rest of it is all about engaging with those things that I've learned. Whereas ketamine, I can just show up, listen to some music, have some thoughts and experiences, and then just my brain just shifts itself. It's just like super fascinating. So that was definitely more of a passive experience that, just got me up and out of bed, you know? And I think that for some folks, they can definitely just like be in that place and possibly try psilocybin and they'll have a really amazing experience. But I knew for me that the ketamine for sure helped because then I was like, I'm ready. I want to explore some things. I just feel I'm not in crisis, so I can actively decide to work on things and participate in my healing in a way that I wouldn't have been able to do before.
Yeah. So with the psilocybin, you ended up being able to go on the retreat. What was that like for you, and kind of what was the sort of protocol that you followed in terms of relationship to the medicine?
Yeah. So it was a lot of things for me. I got a scholarship to go on it. So there was already this awareness that everyone else who was there was going to like be in a different class status. And then the women that were facilitating, so it was Catherine McLean and Roz Watts and then Eileen Hall. And so those folks were all just really great, have really different and interesting perspectives that came together really well. And it was a week long and there were 3 trips. And so there was the option to have like an increasing dose for each trip, or to have the low dose on the first trip and then the second one to have the high dose, and then the third one to have a kind of medium. And so the first 2 were at night and then the third one was during the day. And I chose to do an increasing dose each time because the first trip I was like, I don't feel that much. I feel my anxiety spiral stopping a little faster. The stars look like extra sparkly, but I want to like dive in. And so,
do you know how many grams of what you were taking and how many grams you were taking?
Yeah, so I did like this specific type of mushroom type. That part I don't know.
That's fine.
Okay, I was like, no. I was like, they were cute and small. We saw some of them. But they were capsuled, so that also I think makes a difference for folks in terms of how it hits them or how the nausea affects them. And so the first night I took 3 grams, the second night I took 8, and the third I took 9. And so then on the 8-gram night I was like, oh, okay, this is how we work together. And I was able to really kind of like set a boundary between like me and the mushroom about like what we were going to go into and how we could like come in and out of it. So there was just like space to play.
The 9-gram night, was that a whole lot different, or you kind of...
It was different. It was during the daytime.
That's
so
right.
It was like, I have a lot of earth in my chart. So there's definitely like some kind of stability that is necessary sometimes. And also I just like get into a pattern very quickly. And so I was like, what's happening? We're doing this during the day. Like we've gotten into, like I had my space where I was like laying down. I had the view that I was looking at, like what's going on? So there was like a little bit of that.
By day 5, you're like, this is how we do it here. It's changing.
Yeah, totally. And so, we're in like a totally different space. I hadn't seen like much. Yeah. I don't think I'd been in that space before. Cause it was like inside of their house. And there were only 4 of us who were doing a high dose again, and everyone else was like outside, just kind of having a little bit more like fun and playtime. And I remember at first being like, this doesn't feel the same. And Eileen was like, yeah, it's not going to feel the same. Every time is going to feel different. And I was like, oh, okay. So then I had to let that go. But yeah, it was really different in a lot of ways. And also it was different because there was the ocean, and then I was able to like interact with the ocean at the end of that, which the ocean is like already very important to me. And so to have that, I was like, oh wow, okay, this is what joy feels like, and I don't think I've ever experienced this. So that was pretty magical.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
How did it go coming back to your life after that? That sounds like a pretty intense 1-week experience. How was it to come back to your life?
So I had a little bit of a buffer. I got back on like a Friday night, and then that next morning I woke up and I go to a low residency school in Vermont, and I had to go to residency the next day. And I had like gotten permission to come a day late. I was like, please don't make me miss this opportunity to come to residency on time. And luckily they let me. And so then the next day I got up and drove to Vermont, and that was, it was a lot. Mercury was retrograde at that point. I was like, oh no, I'm doing so much traveling. I hope it goes okay. Luckily it all did. There were a few hangups, but then I was in the woods for a week to like transition back in. So that was really helpful. I could still see the stars. There was still some greenery. And then coming back to the city was a little hard, but then I remember the first time I had to take the train, the first time I had gotten Crocs to go on this trip, and then the first time I wore them out in public, I was like, oh, you're just doing it. You're just living your life, my friend. And just like, there was a lot of active meditation, a lot of just reminding myself things that I had learned, pieces that the facilitators had like tools they had given us like for trip support specifically, but also for integration support. So thinking a lot about those things, and a lot of breathing with my hand on my belly and my heart, and just wanting to talk with people about how mushrooms could support them, but not wanting to be like overly eager and be like, you should all do this, it's great, it's going to change your life. And so really trying to find that balance of being like, yeah, I had this experience, it was cool, whatever.
You might like it.
Yeah, it could,
no pressure.
Yeah, no big deal, but if you want to talk about it, let me know. And then really trying to like continue to build community around psychedelics, and also just see how my life could shift with the integration tools that I had gotten.
Uh-huh. What's it been like for you to build community around psychedelics?
It's been weird. It's been real weird. There are like very few folks of color that I have encountered. There are even fewer like queer folks of color that I've encountered. I was really lucky to meet someone. Catherine did an integration circle for the women who lived in New York. There were 7 of us who lived in New York who went on the retreat. And so a few of us met, and she brought another woman that she knows who is this Black woman who lives in New York. And so I was able to connect with her, which was really great. And she connected me to this call that she facilitates that is mainly folks of color across the States and a few in Mexico who are doing different projects around psychedelics. And so that's been nice. Also very distant, where there's like folks are just all over. Mm-hmm. But she and I and another woman are talking about doing some type of something where we can do some healing work with folks, specifically with Black women, around just like different types of trauma and how to kind of hold space and what that could look like. It's been really strange. There's a lot of psychedelic science drama that I like to know because I'm a Gemini, but also I don't want to get involved in. And I also really want to be a psychedelic therapist. So it feels like I should not completely shut that door, because it's a very gatekeepery kind of space. Mm-hmm. I stand out in those events. I went to a training in the spring that was led by 2 very seemingly renowned psychologists in psychedelic science, and one of them put up a slide and was like, I think this is Maria Sabina. It was just another Indigenous woman. And I was like, you made this slideshow. What are you doing? Mm-hmm. So there's just like a lot of really hard things that are not real in my other communities. They're just things that aren't talked about.
So it's a predominantly, as of right now, a predominantly white dominated and male dominated space.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And straight dominated as well.
Totally, yeah. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? I'm like 6 feet tall. I'm a fat person with curly hair. I'm like very femme. I often have a bright lip on. What's up? So I understand I look a little cunty in the corner, but that's only because I'm judging you based off of the things that you've just said, which were terrible. So that. Yeah. It's been weird.
I want to go back to something that we talked about before this interview, which is that, so you experienced a sexual assault of some kind as an adult, and I'm wondering if you can speak to how the psychedelic, either the ketamine, psilocybin, or both experiences have affected that experience for you.
Yeah. So the first time I had done mushrooms, when I just had the tea, there was the person that I thought about was the woman who was friends with the person who assaulted me. And I just remember the next day, and she was like, well, you don't think it was rape, do you? And I was like, oh, okay, well, there's the narrative that I now have to like believe because someone else has like written this narrative for me. And
you told your friend about what happened, and she said to you, you don't think it was rape, do you?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. And it sounds like you experienced her saying it in a way that was like, not like asking you if it was rape, but more minimizing it.
Yeah, it was more of a statement than a question.
Okay. Yeah.
And it happened in a house that I would then proceed to live in for a couple of months. And we were coworkers. And then during that first like very light mushroom trip, I remember like thinking about her and thinking about she's a white woman and the person was a black man. And that is also the racial makeup of my parents. And so I was like doing a lot of like light connection and association between like her and my mom. And I didn't experience any sexual assault with my dad, but also just kind of thinking about the ways that both of these white women had responded to me around themes of sexual assault. And so there was like definitely there were things that I could have dove deep into had I been doing a kind of like a more intentional, it was definitely an intentional trip, but had I been doing like a more specific intentional trip and a higher dose possibly. And so I always just kind of thought about that and was like, oh, I think there's something to this mushroom thing. And so then cut to this spring. So it's 2018. So 6 years later, and thinking about the ways that the mushrooms continue to support me, thinking about like my mom and like her mom and that type of lineage, and just like the ways in which those women have responded to me. And also, and it facilitated an ability to get back into my body. Sex had always been a thing that was just, it was like the reason I was okay being alive. I was like, sex is so healing, kink is so amazing for me. These are the things that remind me that it's okay to be alive. And so when that was just like taken away from me, I was like, well, now I have nothing. Like there are no useful coping skills. There are coping skills, but there aren't any that like are positive. Mm-hmm. And so for the mushrooms to be able to bring me back to my body in a way that I could just live in it again, and also think about it in a sexual way and engage in sex things again, was like overwhelming for me, because I had spent also the past like year and a half or 2 years first not having sex with people because I was just like, I can't do this. Like my body just won't let me do this. And then trying every so often and being like, nope, still can't do that. Nope. And then was like, oh, I guess I'm just not a person who has sex or dates anymore. And being like, kind of okay with that. And I was like, well, that's fine. I don't want to die. So like, I guess that's fine. But I was like, oh, that thing that's like so important to you. I used to throw play parties. I have dabbled in some porn things that I would like to continue again, which is also something that I didn't think I'd be able to. And it just feels so amazing to be like, oh, hi, welcome, we're back. Which on the third trip in Jamaica, we kind of referred to the room that we were all in as the womb room. And as everyone kind of had their moment of connection that they needed, they would leave and someone would like bring them down to join the rest of the group. And I remember opening the door and being like, what is a body and where is the ocean? And I was just like, I got into the ocean and was like, oh, hello. And yeah, just like being able to re-engage with myself that way has been a specific type of holistic healing that I was like, oh, I can like work on healing other things, but I don't know if this will be a thing that I'll get back. And yeah, and right before, so the retreat was at the end of March, and at the beginning of March had what my therapist at the time referred to as a consent violation, which I also felt was like kind of minimizing, but like had another like sexual assault experience. And
this is after the psilocybin.
This is right before. And
right before the week-long.
Yeah, so this is the beginning of March, and I went on the retreat at the end of March. And so I was like, okay, I tried that again. And again, this is not a thing that wow. I was like, my body is not ready. Uh-huh. Also, people still don't know how to listen to the words that I am saying. So I guess this is just not a thing we're going to do. And so then for that to happen just like a few weeks later and just like re-enter my body was amazing.
Yeah, I love this story. I mean, I don't love the
totally.
Yeah. I'm very unhappy about those. But I love imagining you saying, what is a body and where is the ocean? And then getting in it. And, you know, really being able to feel yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. I remember there were a bunch of us, like, you know, most people were just like sitting on a rock having their feelings, or like sitting on the shore. And I was like, okay, I don't know these people. Most all of these people are straight with, only a couple of other exceptions. And I was like, I'm also the only fat person. I don't even consider myself heavily tattooed, but I am the only person with more than like one tattoo. And I was like, but if you don't take off your swimsuit in the ocean, you will forever regret this. You have to feel your naked body floating in the ocean while you're coming off of this trip. Like,
yes.
And yeah, it was just like a very specific type of freedom that like every time I get in water, I'm like, you have to get naked. But this was like a very just like wider type of freedom that it was like, it felt as wide as like the skyline that I was like, oh, this is an island. And so the sky just goes on forever. Yeah.
I love the story even more that you get to take off your swimsuit and naked in the ocean. Yeah. Every part of it. So good. Yeah.
Yeah.
How has that been for you? You said that you did the psilocybin retreat in March, and how has that been for you since then in terms of being able to feel your body more, and has that stayed, and what's it been like?
Yeah, it's definitely stayed. Even when I got back and was like, okay, I'm in my body, it still took me like not that much time, but it was probably about a month when I got back where I was like, this is really great. I still don't know that I'm like ready to try having sex with other people because I still don't know that I can trust people to honor consent. But I think then my own ability to kind of process what types of experiences I wanted to engage in was really like started to shift in a way that I like after the like my I guess what I refer to as like my main sexual assault, I was either like engaging in really unhealthy for me sexual experiences or none at all, but often just like unhealthy for me. And so I was like, okay, I don't want to do that anymore. So what do I want? And so then there was just kind of some process time. And then
how was that for you? I love this story. How was that for you to ask yourself what you really want?
It was hard. I had to think about what I wanted and why I wanted it, not in like a pathologizing way, but just like, in a curiosity way. Like, what is it that like draws you to that specific type of experience right now? And it was really hard to think about who I wanted to engage with in a way that felt either safe but not too vulnerable, or really vulnerable but with a distance, be it physical or emotional.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like you were still really needing a lot of self-protection.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. So the boundaries started to be like less rigid. I would say throughout the summer, I was like, okay, I know what I want a little bit more. And now I just have to like find the people that I want to be doing this with. So then they would say this fall is really when I mean, okay, it's only been fall technically for like 2 weeks, but in my brain, I'm like, since August really is what I mean by fall, which is still solidly summer. So I guess for the past couple of months, I've been like, okay, let's just like try to do these things and see how they go. And if you don't want to do it anymore, you can just leave, which we all know is not always true. But I was like trying to be really intentional about being like, no, put yourself in situations where you can actually just leave if you don't want to be doing it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also like see what it feels like to show up in this way without having to give your whole self. But being able to like show up with your body and like with your excitement, but you don't have to show up with your trauma history. Like that can be really nice to not have to do, which I think sometimes gets hard for queers because we're like, here, it's my whole self, which is wonderful and beautiful. And also sometimes like casual sex is great. So there's that.
That is a very tricky line in the queer world.
Yeah.
I think in a lot of ways there's a lot of emphasis on, really taking people's experiences and past and history very seriously. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that sometimes it can be difficult to have an engagement that's like joyous.
Yes.
That's
totally.
like really just focused on like joy and pleasure. Yeah. And like, yes, we've all experienced so much trauma, some people more than others. Mm-hmm. And like, what would it be like to really focus on pleasure in this moment?
Yeah. So there's, that. Joy has been like the thing of the year for me. I started listening to this podcast that I was just like obsessed with and listened to a lot while I was in Jamaica, also called the Black Joy Mixtape, that is just, they talk about a lot of things, but like that's obviously the theme of just like, what does joy look like and what does it look like to cultivate joy as a Black person in this world? And so being able to just be like, hey, do you want to have this specific type of like hopefully pleasurable experience, and if not pleasurable, at least like some fun and joy, like, yeah, just like, what does that look like for you to like show up with somebody who also wants to do that, and that can just like be okay. I went to a play party for the first time in a few years, a couple of weeks ago, and was just like elated, I was like, oh, right, this was another thing that I was so afraid that I wasn't gonna like anymore because I don't want to die, and because like my trauma doesn't feel so close. What is it going to be like to engage in this? And I was like, oh my God, it's so great. I still love it. Okay, cool. So there's that also. But just like, I feel like I keep saying this, but just like intentionality and trying to engage in honest conversations with myself. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I wanted to also ask, so I've been asking this in a number of the interviews that I'm doing about this piece around bystanders. And a bystander is anybody who was not the person who caused you the sexual harm, but like anyone else, like for example, this friend that you mentioned, or just anyone else in your world that is present at the time. And I'm wondering if you experienced any kind of healing through your journeys around anybody who would be considered like a quote bystander. And I'm partly asking this question because there's the incident of the actual assault or trauma or events of it. And then there's the way that the world responds to it. Mm-hmm. And that can be as traumatizing, or, like as you kind of stated earlier, can sometimes direct the narrative of how you think about yourself and whether or not you tell people or speak out. So wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. So the woman that I was friends with, like she and I don't speak anymore just because we kind of lost touch. Also, like we were coworkers and friends as a result of that. And then I only told a couple of people. I've only actually like said the whole story out loud like once. And so there's just been like a lot of secrecy, a lot of shame, a lot of responding to myself the ways I would never respond to my friends and their sexual assault experiences.
You mean like a mean voice inside of you?
Yeah, totally. And being like, it wasn't that bad. There's been less of the bystander healing just because there were so few people who I told.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe one way, you can tell me if this makes sense, but another thing that you're kind of saying is that in terms of like bystanders, like it doesn't feel safe to share.
Yeah.
So there's not that many people who necessarily know.
Yeah. And I mean, at this point in my life, I think that most people know, or I think we all just like kind of unfortunately assume that this is like sexual assault and trauma has been true for folks. So there's less of a need to talk about it in a specific way, I guess. And then there were also the years where I would just refer to everything and be like, trauma because of reasons. And I'm like, okay, cool, that totally got you through. But like, let's unpack some of those things now. And yeah, like I had a partner for like 2 years who we like, we moved from New York to Philly together and still didn't actually tell her the specifics of it ever. Because I was like, no, you A, can't trust people, but B, saying things out loud, it feels like there needs to be more kind of thing.
Like you minimize the experience.
Or just that there needs, like, that it need, I guess just that it needs to have been worse or something. Yeah. I mean, I guess like I internally minimize it because that's how the world responds to trauma. And I think that this past year, there's also been a lot of internal conversation about whether or not it's important to say, because I see other people telling their stories a lot, and I'm very excited that people are like able to share their stories and able to find support. And also there's still that voice inside of being like, yeah, but do you need to share your story? Do you need to do this? Generally, everyone in my life anyone who's known me for at least a year and a half can see the very dramatic shift in my life that, this isn't directly related to your question, but just like that psychedelics have supported me through. Yeah. And so I think there's just like a sense of healing in that, of being like, oh, you can like witness my healing, and that like validates it in a specific way, that not that I need validation for my healing, but like around something like this, I think there's something that's nice to have witness to. Or witnesses for, I guess.
Sure. It sounds like in the ways that have felt safe to you, you have let people in to see in different ways. Like there's this person that you were like pen paling with, and then there's the ways that people get to see you through the psychedelic experience, and that there are a lot of reasons why it hasn't felt totally safe to be sharing a lot about this particular assault incident, but that you have found a way in pieces to kind of get the support that you need. Yeah,
and I think that through that I've been able to share like parts of the story that like in connecting with other people about their own trauma, that has been actually like really healing. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much, and very excited to have had you here.
Thank you so much.
All right. Again, many thanks to Gloria for sharing her story, and thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please share about it on social media or with someone who you think could benefit from the wisdom within. And on the topic of wisdom, if this episode is getting you interested in healing with entheogens or psychedelics, here's one last bit of advice from Gloria.
I, encourage people to consider what it could be like for their lives, and also, like when you're ready, you'll be ready, and like the call will come, and you'll know when to answer.
And finally, special thanks to Joey Seward at Left Field Studios for volunteering a lot of additional audio engineering to make this series possible. I'm going to get super real with you for a moment. I am basically stuck being DIY for life, and so I taught myself most of the things I needed to know to make this series from YouTube tutorials. But even with the best tutorials that YouTube can offer, everyone makes mistakes. I've made tons. And there's nothing like an actual professional to help you fix them. If you need an audio engineer, he's excellent. You can find his website in the show notes. Thank you for listening to Inside Eyes. Until next time.